So, I'm glad you're all here. I think more people are coming in. This is pretty exciting. Thank you for the well wishes. We have several people who have jumped in and they understand how the chat works. So I appreciate that. I want to invite people who are in the webinar portion to, hey, Brian.
There we are.
Who are in the webinar portion, that there is a Q&A option that you can submit questions to, and they'll pop up on my screen. I did have several people that utilized the Google Forms, and I have those questions also in a list, and I'm going to try to answer those and weave that into the presentation a little bit, and hopefully kind of cover everything but not take too long. And I definitely want to, Brian was gracious enough. I basically said, we have several events this week. One including would be the Q&A with presidential candidate Brian Carroll on Thursday. But he's obviously more than welcome to stop by and join us for some of these things. And so Brian, without further ado, I heard it was 100 in California. I'm glad you're still with us.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the high was today, but it was hot enough that I came in out of working in the yard and took a long nap.
Well, good for you. That's gotta stay safe here. I do not want to step up one notch in this election. This is where I'm at here. But with that, I would like to jump right in here so that if you need to go, you can. And what I want to do is go to the questions. Some of the questions people sent in. The first couple, so the question I said, ask any questions you want about the delegate election and the convention process. Okay, I may have been a little bit more open than that, but some people ask some questions that are a little bit off that topic. And so the first one is, it seems like this is where they're going with this. The question was, what's the point without being qualified on the ballot in every state and voting territory? I'm going to go ahead and assume that means, what's the point of a presidential third-party campaign?
Well, nobody goes out and does a perfect show the first time out. If you're in theater, you rehearse and you rehearse and you rehearse and you rehearse. In politics, you can't rehearse. You have to actually get out and do it. And as a teacher, and both of you and I are teachers, that you can talk about something, you can explain something, but until you actually get out and do it, people don't learn. And so we have multiple purposes, but one is we're on a training mission. We are learning how it's done. We've already learned. I learned a great deal when I ran for Congress 2 years ago. And I only wound up with 1.3% of the vote, but it was well worth it. And what we want to do, 2 years from now, is have candidates all across the country in multiple races. But to do that, we have to take one step at a time and learn the process, learn each other. A basketball team that goes out, if they've never practiced together, they're never going to win a game. And so a campaign like this is a time for our party members to practice being a team. And we are getting our message out. More people every day are responding. And so we're building a party. We're building committees, hopefully in every state, ideally in many counties within a state. And those will be ready 2 years from now to run a candidate for supervisor, or run a candidate for mayor, or run a candidate for some other local office. And that's the next step in our process. But we have to take it one step at a time. You don't start at the top.
Fantastic. Yeah, I agree. I feel like I hear that question probably more often than any other question, talking to people who are outside the party but are interested in what I'm up to, what you're up to, with the the campaign will produce. in the upcoming weeks. And, that's just a great way to look at it, is that you just can't jump in and unless you're Ross Perot and you're bringing billions of dollars. But even then, without building the grassroots and getting people all across the country on the same page with some, deep set of principled ideas, you're gonna have some definitely gonna have some learning pains without that. I did a little research, and the what's the point question. And so my thought on that, first thing, I saw a political poll that says that nearly a quarter of registered voters do not like President Trump or Vice President Biden. Okay, so 25% of voters said they just don't like either one. In 2016, that number was 20% that didn't like Trump or Clinton. So what is a third party for? Well, if that's where the country's going, right, and then the duopoly keeps producing candidates that are unpalatable for voters, someone has to step in that gap, right, and provide a strong, principled person that at least people who want to vote their conscience can go to the ballot box and pull a lever that they can sleep with at night. So I think that's just a big deal for so many people. And so why do it? Well, that's why. And then how does it get anywhere? That is up to a lot. It's just not up to us, right? We bring the message, but then you have your people on the ground that really need to spread the word, talk up the campaign, talk up Brian Carroll with their neighbors, and just even whole life politics in general. The concept, it's new to people. I mean, for us within the party and who follow the party in general, you might hear that word whole life and it makes sense. It's just like, oh, okay, I get it. All that stuff goes together. Human dignity is paramount. But a lot of people, because of their tribalism, that word doesn't resonate with them. So that's why I feel like I'm involved in this entire party, right? Is that we can try to break that allegiance to, dissonant ideas that don't go together. And where I feel like our platform, our ideas go together, they make sense, and you don't have to argue for things that you don't believe in, right? So,
Yeah, something else.
yeah.
We are in a period of history right now where there is so much dissatisfaction with the status quo and with the current parties. And so there are dozens of little parties getting started. And that's where all the creativity is going to happen. And we want to be part of that debate. This week, the Libertarian Party nominated their ticket. And there's the Alliance Party just nominated theirs, I don't know, a week or two ago. And there's a lot of third party or alternate party activity going on, but nobody is bringing the combination of issues that we are. And the future of our country will come out of debates. I don't think they're going to be debates that are in the major parties. They're the debates that are going to be in the minor parties. And we want to be part of that debate. This is very similar in history to the period in the 1840s and 1850s before the Civil War, where you saw lots of little parties burst on the scene, and some of them were flash in the pan, and eventually the Republican Party lasted. But we're in that kind of a period of history where the problems don't seem to be addressed by the major parties. And so there's going to be a lot of creative thinking going on outside of the major parties, and we want to be part of that.
All right. Yeah. And I think that leads us well into kind of what we're going to go tonight is there's a process to that, right? It's not just like you snap your fingers and things get done. So, why the party has gone in the direction it has gone, we'll get to that shortly. The follow-up question, and I think you kind of answered that already, but someone asked, and I think it really addresses your point of you start somewhere, like the Republicans started very small. And the question is, how do we become a huge political party in the future? And, to a certain extent you answered that, and they bring up the Democratic, Republican, Libertarian. I would throw the Greens in there as, if you're going to throw the Libertarians in as an effective growth party that you could probably put the Greens in there as well. So, what do you think? It's all baby steps, right? So starting at now until the campaign's over, obviously that's not going to be when we become a huge political party, but what do you think as a personal goal in that direction of baby steps to bigger steps that you think the campaign can produce?
Well, you may remember the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, where he got this magic bean that suddenly produced, and took him all the way up into the clouds. There is no magic bean. We grow organically. We plant seeds. We water them. And I think if we can do that, God will bring us the growth. And so we just have to be faithful to sticking to it, building teams, identifying individuals that we think ought to be future candidates for us, and grooming them, teaching them what they need to know. It's an enormous task to just suddenly leap into politics and run for something. And if you don't have a team behind you, it's daunting. And so we have to build the teams. We have to develop the individuals, develop the relationships. And that's a slow process. And we live in an age that wants to microwave everything and have it done in 2 minutes. And that's not going to happen.
All right. Well, I know that we're going to talk to you on Thursday. I figure some of these same questions might come up for some different viewers that might pop in, but I really hope there's going to be a lot more. One of the things that I sent out a Google form today, and I'm going to repeat that process for the rest of the week. And so just as a preview for the rest of the week, tomorrow night, we're going to talk distributism. It's a word that comes up often in our discussions and our Facebook posts, emails, and so forth. And I really think that, we can always use another refresher on that. So John Maydai is going to come by, and Brian, you're welcome. We've had great conversations with him in the past. On Wednesday, the National Committee has its monthly meeting, and I got an approval vote from them that we are going to stream our meeting with probably some explanations thrown in the middle, so it'll be a little bit different. And people will be able to kind of look in, because the delegates, the candidates this week, if they become delegates, they are the ones who are going to choose our next national committee. So it's useful for not just the delegate candidates, but also the party members to kind of get a sneak peek on what that is. So when we get to Wednesday, I'll kind of have some of these discussions where we're talking about what we do, but then also have some Q&A and see where our national committee, we'll let them chime in for themselves on what their thoughts are. So I think that'll be fun. We haven't done that. We record them and we post them somewhere. I don't know if anyone ever really is interested enough to watch a boring meeting. I certainly would not watch any of those meetings. I enjoyed them one time, the first time through, but and then on Thursday, Brian and I will be around for a Q&A, and ask Brian Carroll session that we will, again, I'll send out a Google form. People will be able to answer questions ahead of time, ask questions ahead of time. And then Brian will give us his pearls of wisdom at that point again. So that's the schedule for this week. And then voting will continue. So voting will start tomorrow morning. Just some basics of what's going to happen. I wanted this evening to be a kickoff and kind of a quick explanation of some of the stuff that's going to happen. But it'll start tomorrow morning, and then it'll continue to June 2nd at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. Okay, so you have plenty of time to do your ballots, to come in, see some videos, kind of get an idea what the party's about if you haven't really been too engaged. And some of the regions, which we'll discuss in a few minutes, are going to have more of their own Zoom calls. Hopefully, I'm going to be working with state leaders to reach out to all the voting members to make sure you got your ballots, to make sure you have your answers, your questions answered to what they can do. And if they hand it forward on to the National Committee, we can handle some more questions. But we do want this process. It's not just a vote. And I think that's been my take on this process, and it could be my personal opinion, there's nothing written down about what this really means. Like, this is our first run at a delegate convention, a national convention where they pick the national committee and whatever else. They're empowered to do more than that. And so I believe it's about an exciting period that we'll have every year in the party to really dialogue. There's always time for dialogue throughout the course of the year, but when you focus it and you get all these people together, I think there's just a more significant energy that this week will be about. And so there may be more, opportunities, webinars next week as we wrap up. But giving people a break, we'll go Monday through Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday we'll be off, and maybe we'll come back next Monday for a wrap up. But that's kind of the plan. And, as I said, Brian's always welcome. And Brian, you're welcome to stick around and jump in anytime when we have any of these questions. But Patrick Harris, ASP Secretary Patrick Harris, is the special guest here so that you don't have to listen to me talk the whole time. I know he's well prepared to answer a lot of these procedural questions and some of the, let's say, deeper questions about the ethos of the party that we'll be discussing. So Patrick, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and helping out here. So Patrick, I'm gonna let you jump right in here. We're going to see some people are using the question and answer format. That's actually really helpful. I know some people had a couple questions flash through the chat, but unfortunately the chat kind of streams like Facebook, so it disappears. It's gonna be tough for me to go find that. So if you can Q&A, that'd be great. So here's the question though. All right, Patrick, here we go. How does this process differ from, let's start 2 years ago, because I think it was consistent for a couple of years before that, and then last year. So why don't you take that question, the delegate convention process?
Okay. Oh, and let me start by saying I would show you my face, but Amar is keeping me blocked out. So
oh, I don't know how to do that. Hold on. Sorry. I wonder if I make you. Wait a second. Oh, I just lost him. Hold on a second. I'll have to get him back. And what if I do this?
Okay, let's see. Yeah.
Hey!
Okay.
All
Now
right.
it's working. All right.
I need you to be co-host. My computer keeps dying on me. Too much use during school time, probably, like when I was on hours a day. So.
All right. No problem.
So,
okay. So the question is about the process of the delegate convention in what respect specifically?
I think it's just how is this year different?
Mm-hmm.
And let's just go with 2 years ago, and then last year, there were some similarities when we selected delegates, but it's a little bit then too.
Right. Yeah. So in the past, we've had conventions where our party voters, voting members voted for NC members, and we had some major bylaws changes last year where we introduced kind of more of a representative process. So people in different regions of the country or in some individual state chapters, if they're big enough, are electing delegates. So it's a little bit more of a representative model where all of these delegates are elected. They come together and they have the power to elect the national committee members. They are able to pass changes to the bylaws, other resolutions that can direct the party to do pretty much anything within reason. And so we thought that as the party was growing, that we would need a little bit more of this kind of representation, so that our individual members can still have a voice, but in a way that sort of fits with the growing party, because it would be a little bit unwieldy to expect our hundreds of voting members to pass a vote about everything that could possibly be an issue in the party. So that was kind of the thinking behind some of the bylaws changes that we introduced last year. And so the party, the internal governance and operation of the party works a little bit differently than it used to. And this convention will be the first one in which the delegates are fully empowered to do all of those things. They'll be electing the national committee for the first time. they'll be able to do bylaws changes, platform changes if they choose to. We probably won't be that much going on with the platform because our delegates help to draft and edit and enact a new platform in a special convention that we had last September. So probably the single most important thing that they'll be doing this time around is electing our new national committee members. There are going to be at least 5 of those up for election, 5 spots that is. And so that's, in that respect, it's going to be a major step forward in how we run things in the Solidarity Party. And I hope that that's going to be a good foundation for future growth.
All right. Yeah. I looked this up because one of the people had sent in this email. What are the mechanics for changes to the platform or bylaws? And you answered the platform question. You answered the platform question. The bylaws amendment. So I'm going to read right here from our own bylaws. Says approval of a majority of the delegates at the National Convention when the change has been recommended by the 2/3 majority of the National Committee within the past year, and no later than 60 days prior to the election of delegates. So the National Committee has not discussed any bylaws changes at our last meeting. We don't plan to do it at this meeting, and certainly it won't matter at the meeting that's the week before the convention to be 60 days prior. So that doesn't apply. But also 2/3 of the delegates at the National Convention could choose to amend a part of the bylaws, but then they would only need a majority approval in a referendum of voting members. So if 2/3 decided that they don't like the 2/3, next year they want a majority of delegates at the National Convention to be able to change bylaws, then they could vote on that. If 2/3 agreed, then they'd put it to the voting members and you'd actually have a referendum opportunity. So there's still some ways for the general voting membership to take part in a process. But most, like you said, like the process has been changed where there is a balance now between the National Committee. There's still procedural elements that allow the National Committee to bring forth ideas to the convention and vice versa. But that is a big change. It is a change of direction for the party. And I think one of the things that's come up in the last week or so is, when you're talking about, the voting members individually, it's going to get tougher and tougher for them to know how to, what they could have done to make decisions, across the board for a party, financial decisions, procedural decisions, bylaws, platform, all that stuff. You kind of do want to have some level of expertise for the people making decisions, but you do want to have people who feel like they're part of something. I think I've talked to several people that like saying they're part of the party, like they're a voting member, and so that's another reason, why do this when you're not going to be on all the ballots, because it's a home for people, and that's meaningful. And to me, it's meaningful, especially when, as a person in leadership, I get to talk to a lot of different people and they voice that position. So thanks, Patrick. That's good. One of the questions that is actually in the Q&A area that popped in as part of that is, the question was, is it still possible to vote right now? Actually, so the question is exactly, is it possible to still vote for ASP members without donating? So let me clarify that. On the direct link page, it says you can donate even 1 cent to go through the process electronically. And I believe there might be a question about, if you have any questions, please contact us. So then there's a procedure for, beyond that in terms of service, right, to the party. So if you still have questions about that, please contact us. You can do the admin@solidarity-party.org to have a further inquiry. But it would, the deadline for voting membership for this particular election was May 13th, and we had that publicized for months, and we voted on that in January. So hopefully that answers that question. But again, it'd be great to take more questions and connect with people, outside of this. All right, really quickly, there's a question about having I side with, and I've seen that Brian is by himself as presidential candidate comes up on I side with, and ASP does come up. I got it when I went through. You have to do an additional link to find out what party you associate with. It's not quite clear on I side with. Would you concur, Patrick?
Yeah, I do think it's a little bit tougher to find the ASP on I side with than it is to find Brian, but it is on there. I like you said, I think you have to go to some additional page to find out what party you align with.
Once you've done all your voting and choosing what your positions are, there's like another button somewhere that you have to press to get to that information. So, it's we're there. So it's kind of cool. I just don't know how easy it is and how tech friendly that could be for people to figure out. Okay, so moving on to the next thing is sticking to the convention. So people, again, I really do appreciate, and I'm going to send out a questionnaire for distributism for tomorrow, and I really do hope people take the time to ask your questions. We're going to be here tomorrow. John Maydai will be here to talk about distributism, which seems like a lot for people who haven't heard about it. And so I got a lot of great questions about this process. Okay, so that was how we were different from last year. I think people might enjoy, or at least be educated from, how did the regions, because we did that last year, we had just 4 regions, and tell us the process of that turning into 4 regions in 3 states. Patrick, sorry. You're muted here, let me unmute you.
Sorry, I kind of lost you in the middle of what you were saying for a second there.
I'm sorry. So, yeah, the question was, do you only vote for the people in your region? Okay, so I'm extending the question a little bit more, but the answer to that question is yes, right?
Right.
But so my question to you is, why don't you tell us how the regions were formed? And we only had 4 regions last year, and that's transformed into the break-off states.
Right. Yeah. So yes, the short answer is yes. You only vote for the candidates there in your region, and the simplest reason for that is we have 33 delegate slots, and we have almost 70 candidates this year, and so we felt it really just isn't reasonable to expect people to know anything about that many candidates and try to rank them according to their preferences. So when you separate the delegates into different regions, that makes it a little bit easier to actually have a sense of which candidates you would prefer. So we originally started with 4 regions, the Northeast, Midwest, South, and West. That's what we had in our first delegates elections last year for the platform convention. And we started with that again this year, but what we found is some of our state chapters are getting big enough that according to a formula that's set out in the bylaws that's too boring to talk about, they are entitled to their own representation. So there are some individual state chapters that are going to be electing their own delegates separate from the regions. This year, that is California, Texas, and Pennsylvania. So those are our biggest chapters, and they're all big enough that they will be electing their own delegates. Everybody else will be voting in these regional divisions. Like I said, South, Midwest, Northeast, and West. Despite the fact that you're only voting within your region, some of those races are actually pretty crowded. I think we've got like nearly 20 candidates in the Midwest and a similar number in the South. So it's still going to be a very busy election. Like I said, we have, I think, something like 68 candidates for 33 spots. So we were really impressed with everybody that turned out for that. And I just wish more of them could win. We might look into having a bigger convention next year.
Yep. Yeah. Actually, it was very exciting. One of the things that we're learning about this process, and it's one thing that I feel like I have things I feel proud about that I accomplished in the last year as chair and being on the national committee for a couple of years. But one thing that I just came to learn far too late is that people need to they need a personal touch, and they need multiple personal touches in terms of getting information sent their way for something that isn't their primary, their job, for example, right? This is not something that people go on their checklist of the day and say, all right, first I got to make sure I understand everything that's going on in the ASP, and then I have to go to work, and then I have to feed my family, and X, Y, and Z after that. So, I put out I think a little drop in since like February. I'd put out stuff. Hey, the convention's coming. See if you're interested in being a candidate for the election for delegate. Here's the process. Here's what you need to know. Here's the dates are. Things like that. But like once a month, right? And I talked to some state leaders here and there, and maybe threw out a group email to state leadership saying, here's the process, share it with your party members or whatever. And so, I think I've come to realize that part of just that whole issue, people do more than just this, is that they need multiple reminders, and they need to get that personal touch, that community, that socialization of like, people are counting on me, not in a way that's life or death, but collectively, that's our energy, right? If the more people that do little things, the more all of this comes together. So in the end, as people got more and more informed, it was near crunch time. I mean, that's how most people work, I suppose. But, I think in a smooth functioning an organization in the future, and I hope to see is like these, especially these breakout states, right? I mean, to me, it's very exciting that California, Texas, and Pennsylvania had enough voting size or membership size to have their own elections, because that's now going to spiral and, with the work of the delegates and state leadership to create more energy in that state, right? Because now that state is voting for their delegates. And so it just gives you more impetus to contact your delegates, to contact your state leadership, and for the state leadership to listen and reach out to their membership to really form a cohesion of what they want to accomplish, at least as a state, right? So when it's your delegation, what does your delegation want? Now, Texas has a voice as, Texans, and, broken up a little bit internally, but I think that's an awesome thing. And I think that, that's how the big parties work. I mean, there's the Illinois delegation and, the different major conventions. So I think that's very exciting. A quick question came in. It says, is it too late for a write-in candidate? There are no write-in candidates because our voting system would, I don't know if it's even possible. So I think, that could be something, if the delegates want to discuss that sort of thing, luckily I won't be running it, because that that only takes enough time to figure out, 7 different regions of ballots. So thanks for that question.
I've seen a lot of questions about ballot access, and I know Brian's been answering some of them in the chat, but I don't know if we want to talk about that for a minute, or if that has already...
You know what? I think those are great questions, and I'm going to take all those from the chat and I'll paste them into our thing for Thursday.
Okay.
And then since you're involved in that, Patrick, if you want to come back on Thursday or answer some of those questions offline, and we can kind of share and have maybe Brian or I prepared to answer that. Because I do want to kind of get this done within an hour, and there's still a lot more questions about this year's thing. So let's do it that way. I think that's going to be the best way to kind of get this done. Okay, so we sent out a practice vote through OPA-Vote, and we have 800-ish voting members, okay? And I got about 400 ballots back, all right? So this week, another part of this week that's my goal, and hopefully a lot of the state leadership that's watching, my goal is that we reach out and at least contact individually all the voters in your state, just to touch base with them and say, hey, did you get your ballot, right? Last year during this process, the reason I really wanted to switch to OPA-Vote, we used to use SurveyMonkey, and I didn't even know who wasn't getting ballots and who wasn't answering. Their system did not tell you what the problem was with the ballot, right? This one's it's a lot more user-friendly. There are some downsides, but so I'm going to be able to get a list of emails and then send those out to state leaders as we get near the end, and just make sure everyone has been contacted. Several of the people that answered the survey, I said, yes, I voted. Yes, I got the ballot, but I didn't vote, wasn't interested, or for whatever reason, right? And there were some people that answered that way. So it wasn't a real ballot. Perhaps you'll just wait for the real thing, okay? But I'm glad you're getting the ballot. But the important thing, and you'll see me after the ballots come out tomorrow, I'll keep checking back with you every day saying, did you get it? And reach out to me and we'll figure out, what's going on with that. But with that being said, the practice ballot came out. It was for favorite movie franchises, top 7 favorites. I think I don't even know how many candidates I put in there, like 15 or something. But it was an opportunity to do a ranked ballot, a ranked choice ballot. So the practice vote results is what the actual question is. Why don't you, so Patrick, the question exactly is, I didn't quite understand the practice vote results. Exactly when are excess votes transferred and when is the trailing candidate eliminated? So I don't know if this is really the scope to get that nitty gritty. I think I probably should release maybe a deeper explanation of that in written form, because I don't know if you want to tackle that. But would you like to talk about single transferable vote in a ranked ballot?
Sure. So I freely admit that I do not understand all of the math that is involved in the way our electoral process works. There are some voting experts in the party who know a little bit more about it than I do, but essentially, you're going to rank all of your candidates in order, which you would have seen how that works if you've gotten the practice ballot. And if you didn't get the practice ballot, I saw somebody ask about that, then talk to us, because we want to make sure you're in our system properly. But yeah, so you're going to rank your candidates in the order that you want. And you don't have to rank all of them. You can rank as many or as few as you like. But the way that system works is it will count all of the first preferences first. So, what everybody's number one choice was. And there's a certain cutoff above which that candidate is provisionally considered to have been elected. And so if someone has been elected, then the system will next look at, okay, well, who are the second choice preferences for the people who voted for that person? And then those second choice votes will move over to all the other candidates and be distributed around. There'll be a new cutoff that says, okay, any candidate above this cutoff has been provisionally elected. So now we look at that candidate's second choice, and then it moves on down to the third choice and the fourth choice and so on. And those votes are redistributed to the different candidates, and then eventually some ballots are exhausted, which means that there's no more preferences to be distributed around. Some candidates will be eliminated because there's no way for them to reach the cutoff. And so the voting system will kind of automatically go through this process and reassign votes, based on what your first, second, third choice, and so on is, until eventually you have a list of candidates who have a number of votes that's necessary for them to come in within whatever the number of open spots is. So in Texas, it's 3 spots. In the Midwest this year, it's going to be 8 spots. It's different in the different regions, but so that's kind of a quick and dirty way of talking about how it works. Like I said, it's
Right.
mathematically kind of complicated, and I don't understand it all, but that's how single transferable vote works.
Right, and there's different ways of counting that process, and we use a particular one, which I don't want to get into the specifics, but the general idea in a proportional voting system is that, as opposed to a single seat election where you would take all of the votes that are left over and transfer them, in a proportional system, there's decimal votes. And if you looked at the output, the way we count it is slightly different, but essentially still does decimal votes and transfers fractional amounts, because proportionally, if let's just say there were, we'll use the big parties, right? So in a certain region, there was 40% Republicans, 40% Democrats, and 20% Libertarians. It's very, very unlikely the Libertarians would get any seats unless they were all collected in a particular region, if they were doing, like representatives by district or something like that. But in a proportional representation, you'd vote across the state for the candidates that you thought were the best. And about 20% of the Libertarians would probably get representation, because that's about what that viewpoint has. So, I think that provides a richness to the delegate, the convention, because you vote, and then if there's people who are retired, there's people right out of college, some people that are married in their 30s. I'm in my 40s. I'm not running as a delegate, but there's people like around my age, so like with kids in high school and so forth. So you get different perspectives on what their goals are. It's a pretty I think it's a great way to inspire people to take the voting more seriously, is that they have a chance of being represented even if they're not a majority opinion on something. Okay. And again, those, like opinion, a lot of people would ask opinion on what? Well, as a growing party, we're kind of all just excited and to be in this together, right? You know, as states develop and you know, you have candidates in regions and you have local issues that come up, you know, what people care about in California may be different than what people care about in Illinois, right? And what people care about in Northern Illinois, where Chicago is, might be different than Southern Illinois. But if we had a large delegation, we'd have Southern Illinois candidates if they ran from that region, because we have voters down there. They're going to be able to pick candidates that are from down there. So that kind of thing, you know, you can't have a domination by just like one viewpoint. So that's pretty good. Okay, so Patrick had to step away.
No, I'm right here.
Oh, Patrick. Oh, good, great. Okay, so the next question, and this is why, you know, I would love to talk about ballot access, but I think we'll have time for that on Thursday. But one of the questions was, I would like an overview of convention procedures, for example, Robert's rules, etc. So go ahead with that.
Well, I will also admit to not being an expert on Robert's rules, although I do have some experience with it. We actually do not have official rules of order adopted for the convention. To my knowledge, that is something that the delegates will have to decide after they've been elected. I have heard some people say that they will be using Robert's rules, but that's not actually set in stone. There are other rules of order that can be used for that kind of assembly. So Robert's might be a popular choice, but there are others. But yeah, I mean, there definitely will need to be rules of order for the convention. Now, in terms of proceedings in general, the delegates are going to be responsible for that. No one, you know, sets that up for them, but they'll get together, they'll elect any officers that they need to, they'll set out their rules of order. And so, I mean, really the only thing restricting that is what the bylaws say that they're allowed to do. Mark talked a little bit about that earlier in terms of, you know, what you need to amend the bylaws, and there are certain other things that are, you know, about amending the platform or passing certain resolutions and so on. But they'll set their own agenda. We'll try to keep it contained within, you know, the schedule of the convention, obviously. But they'll set their own agenda. They'll be able to bring up their own resolutions if they want to, which those could be, I mean, it could be pretty much anything. They have the right to direct the National Committee to, you know, do any kind of changes to party policy. It used to be, this was one of the changes that we had under the bylaws. It used to be the National Committee, a majority could do literally whatever it wanted, as long as it didn't contradict the bylaws. But the National Committee also had the right to change the bylaws. Now that's different. We have a little bit of a separation of powers, and so the delegates can instruct the National Committee. They can change the platform. They can change the bylaws, and they'll be electing the National Committee as well. And the bylaws say that there has to be a vote for each separate seat of the National Committee, but it'll also be up to the delegates to develop a procedure for how that vote is going to take place. So all of that is kind of TBA. And after our delegates are elected this coming week, they'll have about a month to prepare for the convention itself. And so hopefully they'll be able to work all of that out in advance, which is pretty much what they did last year before the platform convention.
Right. And again, as a growing party, you know, as someone that, you know, I spent some time on a couple of organizations where I've used Robert's rules. I don't know if that's normal, if that's something that other people might do. You know, if you're involved in, so I'm involved in Knights of Columbus, and we use Robert's rules. I was familiar with it. Our local state chapters, you know, some of them are still in their beginning phases where we have a couple of leaders that are there that are still trying to contact their voting members, getting some interest. And so most people probably don't have, you know, the familiarity with a governing body of some kind or a business meeting where you need to have some structure. So, you know, that might be some things that once the election's over, that people, you know, break out a good video or something on YouTube that explains Robert's rules, or there's one that's like a subversion of Robert's rule that isn't quite as strict, that is pretty useful for like the newbie population, let's say. But, you know, I think the whole process, right? I mean, it's for me, when this was proposed, when the the convention idea was proposed to me, it was a little bit mind-blowing, that we're going to create a body of people who are going to create their own process, right? But then the further explanation was, well, you're choosing these people from your own membership through an election where the members choose, pick people to represent them. And so you're hoping the people are there for the good of the party. And, looking up and down the delegate list, I don't see any shocking names of people. I'm like, man, that person does not know what we're doing here, and they're not working for the good of the party. So that's, a great thing, right? So we have a lot of good people. I think Patrick mentioned we have, 60 plus people going for 30 spots, and it's a shame that they won't all be delegates. But one of the things that I want to, again, say, we're not running against each other, where we're running together. Obviously, you're vying for positions, but I would hope that, the delegates who lose, or I should say the candidates who win and are delegates, would see the benefit of being gracious enough to still work with the delegates who lost in their region, especially, right? Because these are the people for at least another year or two that you're still going to probably come up with in like meetings and networking with them, bouncing ideas off of them. Some of them may be in your state, or a neighboring state. I think that's a big thing that we, as state development, we want to work on having sister states that you can collaborate with when you're still small. But maybe there's 2 cities in each state that are right across the border. I mean, you can do something, together. So I think that's just a point like I said, this week is a point where we can really build energy for the party as a whole, because, we all win when the delegate, when the candidates are out there speaking their minds and, sharing ideas, having, dialogue in good faith for the good of the party. So, I think that's my 2 cents on like this whole week. And that's why I really wanted to spend time this week coming online and talking to people and getting their responses. Okay, so that was the convention procedures, okay? One of the things we didn't talk about is the national committee procedures. And the voting procedures, I think, is appropriate to talk about now, okay? We'll get more into the qualities or just the aspects of what the National Committee does on Wednesday. And actually, let me address a question that I see here. That's actually a great question. The question is, it's in the Q&A here. It's hard to know what next steps to take without data about where we are. Okay, so will the NC be publishing to its members reports about membership participation and finances? And I'm going to go ahead and apologize on my end for that. Very early on when I was on the National Committee, I did publicize membership. I didn't do finances. Both Zeb Bocelli and Tai Chi Kuo, our treasurers, last couple of years have done that. And then like Tai Chi's already got a report he's coming up with he does quarterly reports. And to be honest with you, I mean, I think in a mature organization, you'd have more interest in that. I put out membership reports and I don't know if anyone really cared. And that's the thing with feedback though, right? So the same way, a lot of people didn't know what was going on I still get questions about the convention and the voting dates and stuff like that, even though I put it out there. It's because it's not your primary concern, as you go through the days. But if people were interconnected more, if state chapters were getting more and more active, you'd be able to go to your person in your town, or you could pick up the phone and someone's a close, ASP friend now because you've talked to them. It's probably a little daunting to email me, but I love it when people do. But on the flip side is when we put stuff out there and there's no response and no comments, either positive or negative. It doesn't even matter. Like it's like no one's seen it, and that's kind of part of the problem with like Facebook or Twitter is in the kind of the viral life of how things get exciting. You kind of respond to that now. If a lot of people love your posts, you get that emotional feedback, and probably shouldn't be that way, but here we are as human beings. So.
And I did see Mark's question. He didn't know that there were reports available, and we can probably make sure to make that available to him if he wants to get in touch with me after this. I also wanted to say if there is interest in more of this kind of state of the party kind of thing, I think that's something we probably could build into our convention proceedings next month. if people would like to just see an overview of where we are in terms of membership growth and finances and things like that. I actually thought about adding that to the program. So if you just kind of want to get a general idea of where we are in those kind of metrics, we can definitely, make sure people are informed about that.
Yeah. And I think, like Facebook doesn't really work so well for that. And I've been pushing, I know some people find groups.io a little bit cumbersome, and that's totally understandable. It's not meant to be, on your phone. But it does have a location for files, and that kind of information can definitely be stored and cataloged for people to view. We can put it in a format that's easily accessible, both membership numbers, financial numbers, areas of growth. Those kind of things can be useful. And I think if state leadership really wants to take that data analysis aspect, I'd be all for it. My goal for after this is over, this election of delegates is over, which is June 2nd. My term ends at the end of the convention, maybe at the beginning of the convention. I'm not sure. We'll have to ask the delegates about that. But when that's over, I'll be off the national committee. But between June 2nd and then, I'm going to be all in on state development. So more of those questions. I'll throw some more, Google Forms out there with questions and opportunities, and if people are interested in connecting with state leadership, because like I said, it's a circular process. I really feel like I did make a mistake, in my 2 years, like assuming things were one-off deals. I sent an email out, and then that should take care of whatever that issue was, right? And I think that human element of hoping that you could get things done one time is not the way to go forward. And if anyone, all the delegates, if you're watching, the candidates, keep fighting. Make a list of things you want to come back to, put it on a calendar, and touch base with people again and again and again. In state leadership, it's a big circle that you kind of have to go through, because there's lots of people out there with lots of questions, and if they're answered, you never know who might pop up with a lot of energy and excitement. We do have, like I said, there's a login for groups, and you can control that login. That's really easy to do. Documents, all that kind of stuff. There's a state chapter leader, state group that it's only for people that are signed up with their states. So
I should say too, we are currently planning on kind of doing an overhaul of certain aspects of our website. Our webmaster, Chris Travers, is working on that. And one of the things that I have wanted to do for a while is to make some of that data more accessible to members, just the kind of thing that Mark is talking about in his question. So I hope that we will have something like that on the party website.
Right. Absolutely. And it's that kind of feedback response. If we get people that want to use it, I think that it just energizes more creation and more availability. But, all that kind of website stuff, that technical aspect, there is, for a volunteer organization, that is something that is always going to be a problem. And that's why, social media has been such a richness for us, because most people can use it very effectively. So, it's that balance and moving forward. All right, so then let me see if that takes all the questions I got from Google Forms. I'm going to try to look through this webinar chat here. Like I said, it's not super conducive to, so the ballot access, I think that's what Patrick, you were talking about. We have a good question here, and this comes up actually pretty often. And again, the delegates could talk about this. This is an example of the power of the convention. So a person says, what about if the party name was just the Solidarity Party instead of the American Solidarity Party? I wasn't there when that name came up, so I can't tell you if that argument was made at that point. But, that's a fair question. Again, not outside the bounds or the scopes of what the convention's about. But, is that something that you'd get enough voting members or delegates to discuss, right? So that's up to them. Again, once the delegates are selected, I wanted to talk about this for a moment. Is they'll be named, and we'll have it on the website, and an email will go out or whatever. and we have their emails. I'll double check and confirm with them that they'd be willing to release their emails to the voting membership so that the voting members could contact them, right? And say, you are my delegate, and they could talk about whether they voted for them or not, but they are the constituents of that region or state. And, it would be good for the delegates to at least, answer emails and if they politely disagree on something, they can have that, right? But that's part of the process of being a candidate for delegate and building the skills. I think Brian said, who are we grooming to be future candidates? Being a candidate for delegate doesn't make a promise that you would be a delegate in a normal election, but those are the skills that you build, is connecting with people and responding and being political. So there's that. Coalitions with various elements of the Greens Libertarians Constitution. I think one of the things that we are very proud of is where we stand. So if people are willing to stand on common ground for certain issues, I'm sure we can discuss those issues. So I think tomorrow we'll be talking about economics, so that might come up some more.
Might be worth mentioning, I think one area where we definitely do align with a lot of those kinds of parties for pretty obvious reasons has to do with voting reform. And some of our party members have been especially interested in making connections with other third parties to, make those kinds of institutional reforms that will challenge the duopoly. And Desmond Silvera has been involved in making a lot of contacts with other parties for that reason.
All right. Okay, so someone's saying that they didn't receive their ballots. So the ballots don't go out until tomorrow morning. So you haven't missed anything yet. And again, it'll come out in the morning, and you should see it. Do a search for OPA vote, OPA VOTE. It could go to your junk mail or your spam if your filters are set a certain way. I got mine luckily in my inbox, but we'll see. Again, a good question here is where do we find a copy of the bylaws? I think that's in the voting members files area, which that's again a reason why that's not that useful, because it's really hard to find stuff in there. Do we have a campaign song or motto? You know what? Let's save that for Brian on Thursday. Brian, let's think about a campaign. You got a question? You got an answer to that? Here you go.
Let me just say that we've discussed it, and it would be really nice to have a even some kind of little ditty. One special need is that sometimes people misspell my name, and in write-in states, we want to make sure that people know that it's Brian, because sometimes Brian is spelled with a Y, and that it's Carroll, because sometimes people want to spell it with just one R or one L, or even stick an E on the end or something weird. So if there was somebody could come up with a ditty that stressed the spelling. Fortunately, Amar's name is easier to spell, but if it could come up with the spelling for my name, that would be very handy if somebody creative could come up with that.
Yeah, luckily they don't have to pronounce my name. I don't know how that it gets mispronounced quite often with letters that don't appear in my name. So that's kind of interesting. And then you could be honored with the name Brain Carroll. I think we discussed that last week. You see that sometimes.
We don't want to introduce any more misspellings in any more write-in states.
Okay. So there was actually a song I recorded. It was actually for fun a while ago. Sarah Field is one of our editors, and she wrote words to the song Solidarity Forever. Is it Pete Seeger, right? That's the original artist. And she wrote the words that would fit our principles. And I did the song. I don't know what happened to that. I think it's on YouTube too, still. It's called Solidarity Forever ASP version or something. I don't think that's where we want to go. It's just me recording on my...
That song goes way back beyond Pete Seeger, goes to Woody Guthrie.
Okay. So, but did you ever hear her version, Brian? Or her lyrics? It was her lyrics, my version, I suppose.
I think I probably did.
Okay. All right.
We had several several fun things going on at that time.
All right. So we got that. The question is for what are the things that electing NC members and a statement of principles are people discussing about the delegate camp, like for the convention? So, you know, at this point, I'm not sure if there's anything else people are discussing specifically. I think one of the big things that I just saw someone ask about bylaws, though. We should post the bylaws, and I'll send that out to the delegates so that they should read those. I mean, the delegates really should have, you know, a working understanding of what the bylaws say, especially with regards to the convention, right? The candidates in the convention and the national committee, since they're going to be voting on national committee members and authorities. So that's like, are there any changes that they want to make to some of the wording, right? So that's very much in their purview and probably, you know, pretty significant. Patrick, anything else, other thoughts on that question?
Oh, well, I was going to say I'll post the bylaws in the chat for anyone who just wants to look at them, but
Okay.
which is actually what I was doing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'll give you a second to do that.
Yes.
I want to wrap up. That was a good hour. I didn't want to hold people more than that. Yeah, I see some state leaders basically jumped in saying they do want to see reports. That's great. State of the party for the convention. Great idea. I'll keep that in mind. I am tasked with opening that, so that'll be fun. Let's see here. Okay, things will be better. No. See, that's the problem with this chat. Again, I do appreciate your questions. If we do more of these, that Q&A feature is amazing in this, and it helps a lot. So let's see here. Okay. Yeah, so that's all I see there. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks to Brian and Patrick and everyone that's been watching. If you have more questions, it seemed a lot of questions will fit really well with Brian. If we're doing ballot access and kind of campaign kind of ideas, that'll fit on Thursday. Couple of questions I saw on distributism, which obviously it's going to talk about tomorrow. And then the national committee stuff, I'll try to take that and create a document that I can share with national committee members and maybe dole off some questions and have people prepare answers. What do you think, Patrick? Do you think that'll?
Yeah, I think that's very doable.
Yeah, so because we've had people now, Patrick and I and several others have been on for 2 years, and we're finishing up our 2-year term. So people definitely have some experience and some fresh perspectives that it'd be valuable to hear from them and not just you know, my thought on the whole process. So until tomorrow night, same time, it'll be 9 p.m. Eastern with John Maydai. Brian, if you're, again, more than welcome to stop in. I will send out a Google form for questions that you may have. You can type them, and it'll be, that way we'll have them in advance. You know, John will be able to look at them. I'll be able to sort them and order them a little bit. I will also be checking in on the ballots. So the ballots will come out tomorrow. When you wake up, they should be in your inbox. You don't need to vote tomorrow. You know, you may want to take the week and think about what you hear online. I know several states and regions, like the South had a great meeting on Saturday, Patrick. I stopped in and watched a little bit. That was great. A lot of the candidates were there. I know some of the other regions are having meetings. Utah's having their state convention on Thursday that Brian and I will go to after our discussion. So, you know, exciting things that are happening here. We'll continue to remind you, June 2nd is the cutoff. And so you could vote on I would say June 1st, perhaps, or 2nd, if you wanted to, or right away, if you know who you like. So until tomorrow, thanks so much for coming, and we'll talk to you. We'll see you then. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.